Welcome everybody, I'm Santiago Nieland and this is The Divine Within, the invisible connection with God. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about the redefinition of the cross. I have with me April Helen, a longtime reader and friend, and we're going to be really unpacking for what we really think and perceive as the meaning of the cross, what really happened. Because for 2,000 years, the cross has been one of the most recognized symbols in human history. It has been worn, worshipped, feared, and misunderstood. For many people, it represents guilt, sacrifice, and a God who required suffering in order to forgive. But what if the cross was never meant to inspire fear? What if it was meant to reveal love? In this episode of The Divine Within, we explore a powerful reframe offered through the teachings of the Atonement book. That the cross didn't change God's attitude towards humanity, it revealed it. Together we move from the traditional idea of atonement to something far more personal and transformative. The living experience of aligning our lives with divine love. So welcome, April Helen, it's a pleasure having you here.
It's always a joy to be here. Aloha, y'all, all across the globe in this holy season that many on the planet consider and celebrate one of our great master teachers who roam the earth. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's really an interesting and reflective time always, Easter season. So it's good that we have this topic, which I think it's very interesting, and I think if we understand the true meaning and really what is behind all of this, it becomes a very powerful symbol. Not only a symbol that unites let's say a faith, but it really gives you a powerful tool. So. Let's go from this concept that we were giving, which is the breaking the myth of the atonement, or stripping the myth of the atonement. And for centuries, the story surrounding the cross has been told in a very specific way: that humanity sinned, that God required justice, and that Jesus was sent to pay the price. But what if the story missed the heart of Jesus' message? In the Atonement book, we offer a very interesting and we see a very profound reinterpretation that the cross was never about appeasing an angry God, but about revealing the loving nature of a divine Father. In this segment, we begin by gently questioning the traditional idea of atonement and opening the door to a far more liberating understanding of the cross. So, April Helen, this is a very I don't want to say touchy, but it's a very polarizing topic, which is the atonement. Did God really send His only child to rid the sins of humanity? What was really behind all this sacrifice, let's say, of Jesus in the cross?
Yes, and wasn't it on a recent podcast with you and Derek that you have touched on this idea that directly relates to the reframing, redefining this vision of what we understand the cross to be in regards to it being directly related to what some call original sin,
Mm-hmm.
and the idea that Jesus was sent to lay down his life, and how beautiful of a sentiment that is. Yet from my understanding of the new revelation that is brought with the Urantia book and all of my studies for the last 30 plus years in the self-improvement, where accountability and self-responsibility, taking responsibility for the things that you do. We were
Mm-hmm.
not born into original sin, and Jesus came to show us how to live, how God would live as a human walking this earth. And what a guidebook. And I love the paper of, I think it's a section called The Acme of Religious Living.
Mm-hmm.
I've
Okay.
mentioned this in this podcast before, where it describes Jesus's very well balanced character, and
Yeah.
he was this person of good cheer, yet he also was firm in giving this new way to undo all of the preconceived notions that may have been misunderstood before. He was a fan of service and also turning tables at the money people in front of the church. You know, he was firm in this new way. So
Gentle but firm. Yeah.
yeah, such a equanimity
Equanimous. Yes.
when within his character. So I love this idea of the in the Urantia book, it says that our planet, Urantia, for all of the neighboring planets in the celestial organization of the super universes, that we are known as the world of the cross. And
Exactly.
it is an endearing name as far as their vision of us, because they understand that Jesus didn't come here to save anybody and be sacrificed like a lamb, shedding blood. No, it is the new idea of he came here to show us how to live, and really
Exactly.
embracing that as we move forward in our day-to-day art of living.
And this is the basis. I mean, I think we before we reframe the atonement and re-understand what it really means, what the cross really means, we have to, like you said, go back into what the original sin, and what we know and what biblical uh, stories or biblical accounts tell us is that Adam and Eve came and they sinned, and we are all guilty of that sin. Number one, I think we're not accountable for somebody else's sin, so which is something that I always, when I was brought up. In Sunday school and in church and Catholicism, they told you about this, and it kind of didn't make sense to me, because how come if you're supposed to be accountable for yourself, how come you have this original sin upon you? And so that sets everything up. I mean, we're damned. We're even if we didn't do it, we're in that pickle. So we needed somebody to come and save us from that. And this is what Jesus is, in theory. Well, not in theory, but I think a lot of this, from what I understand, was not from his life and teachings, but later from the scholars, the early church scholars, the early Christian scholars, that really kind of wove that in, that concept of being the sacrificial lamb, and making all those comparisons, and eventually will make that concept and that practice or teaching of the atonement. You know.
Definitely. And I love, as you and I appreciate redefining and reframing and regrowing anew, that this is a popular phrase these days among not only your ancient book readers, yet a new wave of Christians, of this shift from the atonement to at-one-ment.
I like
And
that.
I put on my glasses because I want to read this section in paper 88, section 4, the meaning of the death on the cross. And although Jesus didn't die his death on the cross to atone for the racial guilt of mortal man, nor to provide some sort of effective approach to an otherwise offended and unforgiving God, we dot 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 we move into the fact that Urantia has become known as the world of the cross, and Jesus desired to live a full mortal life so that this interpretation of the death on the cross, we can be careful not to make the great mistake of failing to perceive the true significance of his mortal death. And that in itself is such a awe-inspiring, um, comforting, right? And to wash away that fear that seems to be set in humanity when I too was in Sunday school and didn't
Hmm.
understand why this, you say it's an all loving, all merciful God, and
Exactly.
yet there's also this piece that doesn't seem all loving and merciful. And it, so now in this new era, as we have this new revelation within the Urantia book, we get to see the magnificence and an expanded version. If people don't know out there, if you're just a new student to the UB, that we get to see more of the context of Jesus's life and the conversations that he had with not only apostles, yet passersby on the street. And
Hmm.
then,
Yeah.
and then after the resurrection, we get what all of these, diatribes and all of the scenarios that he allows us to see even more of the art of living skills brought so that we can take them in and live a more value-based life. It's really inspiring.
And it's I like what you're talking about and the vision that it provides about Jesus because like as in any story, any good book, the rounder the character, the more the descriptions you have and the actions and interactions with other people is that you really discover the character, you discover their longings, their fears, and this is what really I like about this account of Jesus. It brings him so much to life, and or no, not to life, but close to us. And I think this is another part to really understand or redefine, as we were saying, the atonement. If you understand beyond what we have from the four Gospels, where we do have this glorified Jesus, and we have what we know of all the what he is, which is a divine nature, but also the human nature, and how that as we struggle with our own material physical nature, he had to struggle through that. And one of the things that I think is very important, and it's important to mention here, is during his bestowal missions, which that we always think of the next podcast when we have this, but maybe next time we're going to talk about the bestowal missions. But one of the within the many missions or the many requirements or obligations that a creator son has is that they have to abide by in their different incarnations by the will of the either the Father, of the Son, of the, and in this case when he incarnated as Jesus, it was doing the will of the Father. And it's very interesting that doing the will of the Father is that any and every creature has their own will. A willing creature can do whatever they will, and they, in the end, we willed, or this planet willed, to do that crucifixion. So it's interesting how instead, it's this redefinition is that he basically, you know, set his will aside, even if he was more powerful, if he was a creator son of these creatures that crucified him, he let their will be upon, be done instead of his, because that's how it works. That's very interesting.
It it's really, what an incredible scene that is described. And whether you're Anchovy readers or not, you may know of one of some of his final words: "Forgive them. They know not what they do."
Hmm.
That is one of the key pillars of my life, and being able to accept as I live in the ideal that humanity is my family, the cosmos is my family, our family, to learn that everyone is intrinsically valuable, and to have this acceptance and forgiveness piece that is an ongoing technology within this experiment of spiritual beings living in these animalistic bodies on this planet. I That is so, so powerful. I love that you brought that up. And the fact that he was given the choice: you have done your job.
Yeah,
You
this is
can
important.
you can be transported off the planet without having to go through the human death. And because of his just beingness as this great Michael son, creator son, as Santiago said, you have to go as that order of being in order to be full sovereign of your universe. You have to go through these incarnations to become your created being. So when I think it was when Adam and Eve made their choices, that's when the universe looked at Urantia to be the final
Mm-hmm.
bestowal of Jesus's seventh bestowal to become an actual human. And how cool that it took Melchizedek then playing his role to get Abraham to attempt that turning everybody from the poly to the
Yeah,
monotheism
yeah.
and one God theory to pave the way for Jesus's coming.
Yeah,
Like,
all this time that it goes in planning, in between things. It's really the way that we experience the cross, and as we were saying, is really how we. You were saying the way that he died, and expressing in his last words, not for him, but for the people that really crucifying him, and that sets the tone, and gives you in my case, for many struggles, it gives you the strength to really go through them. If you think of Jesus and you think of his strength in there, and in the his character of how he endured all that process, it always is inspiring, and it helps you go through a lot of things, so that's really one of the powerful things about that as a symbol, which is what I want to go. So the cross is more than a historical event. It is a living symbol. Two lines intersecting, one vertical, reaching towards the divine, and one horizontal, reaching towards humanity. According to the Urantia book, our world became known throughout the universe as the world of the cross, not because of suffering, but because this planet witnessed the triumph of love over hate. In this segment, we explore the deeper meaning of the cross as a meeting point between divine alignment and human sacrifice. So, Abraham, I like this imagery, and how this because it is a symbol. Any Christian, the sign of the cross. That's a part of the symbol. And although I am not a Catholic, I won't consider myself Catholic. Although I was brought up, I still remember, and that's something that is still up to my days. Part of a powerful symbol. So, how can we talk about the cross as a symbol?
yeah, I really love that you brought up just the simplicity of these two lines intersecting
Yeah.
and this, how we're in our conversations and my work with clients and friends and strangers on the street of the integrity of the values that we say we have and living by them. So this inner world and the alignment of the values within the expression of the outer world. And so, this connection to deep source and divine values in relationship to humanity. And that cross is the intersection of divine alignment and altruistic living. So,
I like
any
that.
life is lived in this alignment, which leads to love. And also, you brought up suffering. And one of my favorite ideas around that is you can choose to suffer or not. We're all going to be challenged, right? And the UB, there's a whole section on the inevitabilities of life.
Mm-hmm.
If you want hope, you have to have at the other end these situations that call for hope to be present. If you want equality, you have to have situations that have inequality so that you can get there. And although we're on an experimental planet, and if you don't know that, we'll probably get out into that in a future episode, because that
Yeah.
I think is one of those most powerful aspects of the revelation that we're on an experimental world where we do not have a physical representation like all many other planets in the universes of universes have. So we're doing this as an investigation, as an experiment with each other. And so this I call it, some of my favorite teachers brought this term to me, that it's volunteer suffering. You take
I
it
like that.
on to go into the fire of the challenge. We're going to be challenged anyway in life. And I flip that into, how can I live through challenge with grace and with integrity and living up to the values that I say I have? I'll certainly say I don't know if I don't think I intuit that none of us are going to be perfect on this planet, because there's thousands of planets that we get to, refine our character towards the God that we're aiming to become, to fuse with. So hold your roll, slow yourself down. Don't
But
think
this
you're
is
going
this is
to do
good.
everything on this planet.
I like this because it takes a lot of the burden out of, and the the because yeah, sometimes you're too hard on yourself, and that's something that this takes out, and that uh the voluntary suffering, I think, is very important, and that's why I like Peterson a lot, because he really nails it down in a practical sense that it's he doesn't call it that way. He says the tragedy of life. He frames it that way, and yes, there's a lot of different situations where you're going to be called to to rise up to the situation, and we've talked about this before, and it's very important, that you humbly go through those processes and learn from them, do the best, because that's what happens. You don't go you never go into battle, say thinking that you're going to survive. You never know what's going to happen. You never go through many of the challenges knowing if you're going to survive them. And you just go and do your best and hope for the best, and based a lot on faith. And I think that's another part, that I like about the cross, and the way that Jesus went through that process. The faith he had on traversing death in that experience. Of
Mm.
going through this. I always, when I was a kid, and I always hated going to the dentist, but I had to, it was kind of that, I was okay, I have to go and suffer through this process, but at the end I'll be saved. I'll be good. This too will pass. But take it to another level, of course. But I imagine that, and I always, I saw Jesus, and that was my kind of my strength in there, to go through that process.
Hmm. Well, gosh, that I think we mentioned this on a past episode, that my idea of the celebration of life of people before they actually transition from this world, I think is super powerful, and something that a
Yeah,
culture, we as a culture, can move into memorializing people before they transition. And I think of New Orleans jazz funerals. That's what I want. So,
yeah,
anybody out there listening, I want to be celebrated in such a way that you all come together and are so excited that I get to go on and move into the resurrection halls and the mansion worlds. And that is another
yeah,
key point of what the revelation brings to us. You and I were chatting before we got on this call, that shifting the vision of what's happening after death gives us much more comfort to face death in this human form. So the unknown, the unexpected, or even the vision of the boring nature of people just playing harps on a cloud for eternity. We get to, I'm so excited about this. You can feel it in my smile, that it is a freaking adventure for
yes,
eternity. Once we fuse with God, after thousands of world of refining our character, then we get to go out and do and teach and administer planets and apply for job offers that resonate with our core being and the skills that we've come to really embody. And yet we're still going to face challenges. Challenges are inevitable, right? We're still going to have aspects of reality that we have to gracefully find solutions for. We're going to be a lot better at it thousands of planets from now.
A lot of experience ahead, let's say, not only the earthly experience, but yeah, celestial experience, which is important. Yeah, definitely.
Oh my gosh. Hey, you reminded me, I wanted to bring up another aspect of the symbol of the cross as supreme love in action, right? Y'all have heard me say that values, all values, when integrated into relationships with other people and circumstances, all of them lead to love. And so there's no condemnation. That's where the acceptance piece, the forgiveness piece comes in. There's no condoning of wrongdoing because we're all going to be making what some people call mistakes. I just look at them as everything is a lesson learned. And it's about transformative love. So love doesn't just forgive, it literally transforms and dissolves error. Jesus's response to harm, remember, is forgive them. Father, forgive them. They know not what they do right now. And especially because we're on an experimental world, we don't have a physical representation to show us. And so this love can become contagious and creative and rehabilitative. It is so nice. So the cross as a triumph of
Yeah.
love over hate, not a punishment over sin.
This is what I like. It's not punishment over sin, but the triumph of love. That's one of the things, and it's something. Also, another thing that we're talking about is that the cross is not something we're given; it's something that we choose to carry, and
Mm.
this is a choice, right? This isn't. How can you take us a little bit deeper into these concepts?
Yeah, well, in my work, I I appreciate the idea of really choosing words carefully. So when
Mm-hmm.
would look at that, picking up the burden of the cross, I wouldn't use that. I would like I'm lifting up my crown of the cross, and this
Okay.
idea of I don't even like the word suffering anymore yet, and I'm getting away from a 30-year motto of challenge is the path. I used to like
Yeah.
that was one of my mantras. And now it's solution finding, grace in solution finding. Because if we shift away,
Yeah.
as I continue to say that motto, challenge is the path, well, more challenges. I found my life. I was always in challenges. So
Mm,
now, and so as just I've shifted that thinking
that's
into
good.
solutions with grace, that there's now more of a flow and an ease, and I'm not like burdened with this challenge. Like, that's a heavy word. So that goes back to this volunteering yourself to see all things as an opportunity to learn. I mean, that's really just so simple. The whole universe is an education
Yeah.
system. We're all in this experimental world, university, and the more that concept can get into the mainstream, the more our relationships will live in integrity with the values that we idealize. A lot of people don't even know what values are. So, like at the simplest level, and we've said this in podcasts before, start researching what values are and start seeing what values that are easily yours, like naturally yours, and then look at what values you admire in others, and you'll naturally, as you start seeing who you're surrounding yourself with, and are they in alignment with the values that you say you want and want to live by? Because then there's that shedding process of who your inner circle is, because as we know, in this information era, this information rich era, and of discerning what truth is, that we become who we're informed by. All the content that we're consuming becomes us. So being very, very discerning about what you let into not only your food, your thoughts, your relationships, your movies, your music,
Yeah,
your
yeah, you're
social media scrolling.
Yeah, no, and I like that you bring this up, and again, I'm gonna go back to Peterson, but I'm reading I mean, it was his first book, and like what he says, it's called Maps of Meaning, and one of the things that he mentions is that before we really got into science, we really gave meaning to things, to every situation with had meaning. Now, as the more with science, if we are, the more techie, we lose that meaning. So how important it is, and I bring this up because how important it is to always be in for a purpose, and I not only the ideal but a purpose. And we've talked about this before, because in this world that everything is, constant interaction, constant stimulus, constant everything, suddenly you lose the meaning. And what is that meaning? And the difficult thing is that it's not one shared meaning. Everybody is unique and everybody has their own meaning. And that's part of, I think, how we've learned it here is you have to find that meaning, number one, and you have to achieve that meaning. So imagine when we're saying, how if the what you bring in and what you talk about, and the symbols and everything, if you do not give meaning and you do not put that in front of you, what's behind that, what's motivating you, it's going to be hard. That's why the people are so lost in many cases, and they're really without, you know I don't want to be redundant, but meaning, in a general sense.
Mm. Yeah, well, it reminds me of the studies over the last decade that loneliness is at an all-time high. And one of the other aspects that the Urantia book lifts up, one of my favorite pillars in life, is teamwork. And
Yes.
as we move into being really conscious about who we surround ourselves with, and as you get onto this path of seeing more purpose, giving more meaning to your life, then the universe, the angels, the midwayers do their job to nudge you into teams that all of your varying talents can use each other. I think of using people as an actual positive context with good intention, because as we use each other, then it not only doubles our power,
Yeah, your
yet
capacity. Yeah,
exponentially
I agree.
exponentially we grow, and then that just creates these ripple effects out into humanity, and helping the ascension of the planet to where we know we're going. We know this planet is moving towards the era of light and life. And I know that even within the Urantia community, there's some debate about this planet in an apocalyptic era. I don't see it that way, because we've had so many missions to the planet, particularly Jesus's mission to our planet as a creator son of 100,000 other planets. And so we are very safe. We're
We're
secured.
very
We're
important.
watched.
Yes.
We're an experimental world. So I truly, in all of my heart, I look forward to being out in the cosmos and one day hearing about the beckoning, the ringing of the bells that Urantia came into the era of light and life, because I know it's going to happen. So bringing these practical tools as you and I love to do for our human family, of thinking eternally. I think that is another idea. If getting out of this planet is our only thing, thinking eternally, and we are in this just blip of the experience, this, snap of a finger, it's going to be over. So what can we do? Why are we doing it? In my eyes, is to help others see this grace and solution finding. And within teams, then our loneliness factor goes down. We can continue to surround ourselves, which I'll just take a moment and pause. I've so enjoyed our relationship over the last 2 or 3 years, and finding someone who I really resonate with. And then in our bigger community of the Center for Unity, shout out to Center for Unity, and the bigger aspect of even Urantia book readers, yet also what the Urantia book teaches us to know that there is truth in any spirituality or philosophy. So I really feel like this human family of what, near 9 billion people on the planet now,
Sort of.
we all intrinsically valuable, have something unique to offer. So just recognizing this idea that Jesus taught, we're all in one family.
And
And I'll just do a
then,
little mic drop on that.
no, and that's actually a great segue into the next episode, which we're going to be talking about love in action. The cross did not happen in just a few hours outside Jerusalem. Before that moment, there were 33 years, a life lived in patience, compassion, courage, and service. The Urantia book invites us to see the cross not as a symbol of death, but as an invitation to live differently. Carrying the cross means choosing love when it is difficult, choosing service when it is inconvenient, and choosing compassion in a world that often chooses fear. In this final segment, we explore what it truly means to carry the cross in everyday life. So I think this is the takeaway of what it is to be carrying the cross, April Helen.
Mm. Yeah, well, it takes me into thoughts of the real meaning of salvation,
Okay.
and that it's not about allowing yourself to just kind of cop out and not take responsibility because Jesus is
Mm-hmm.
your savior. Yet it's realizing once again, and I think repetition is just fine, that we're already, all of us and the entire cosmos, not just on this planet, children of God, our creator, whatever you want to call this first source and center.
The
And
force.
the
Yes.
force that love naturally leads to service, altruistic living. So from how do I get saved to how do I love and serve? And
Mm-hmm.
this daily practice of the real cross between this inner world reality that you have for yourself and how you move in the world, how you express your values. And I know I've said this before, a lot of the work for myself and for a lot of people who I talk to, it's the mind. And
It is
and
a
we
mind, yeah.
can speak values. Yet what is happening really internally in the mind, and I know I've said this too, I catch myself not being in alignment in my mind. And so that's where I work a lot in my meditations and even my reactions to things in life. I mean, I can tell that I'm judging someone and what they're saying by like this the crinkle of the third eye.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
It's like, and as soon as you close that, it's like you're not in that receptivity field. So the more I can
yeah, but
relax and receive and
But it's good that you're conscious about that then, and we said it before, it's good that because your body reacts. I mean, it's also a mechanism that, and that also gives you clues into why you're reacting. Not that, I mean, And sometimes, like we said, you get to compassion and you see the reasons behind that feeling and that person's reasons behind that, and it sort of strains out in the end. But yeah, I like what we were saying, in this, and I hadn't thought about it until basically this podcast. The when you do the cross, it's, of course, it's the Father, it's the Son, the Holy Spirit. By the way, when I was young and they taught us the cross, I had an Irish grandmother. My last name Neeland is Irish, so instead of saying Holy Spirit, it was the Holy Ghost, Father, Son, Holy Ghost. So up to today, I always say Holy Ghost. So that's an interesting thing. But anyways, I like this way because you're bringing, apart from representing the three persons of the Trinity, you're bringing heaven and earth, and that which is as in heaven is in earth. It's the Tao. It's in all different the Hermetic principle. Everywhere we see this, the unification of heaven and earth, which is the supreme. As in heaven and earth, it means that, we're becoming perfect as God is perfect. We're doing the God's will. And I like, the horizontal, that's in our level, service. And that's really where you express love. I think, yeah, as I became a father, and even before that, the best way or the greatest feeling, is really serving. And it sounds cliche, and and anybody that see it, that's, oh yeah, it's so cliche, but it really is. When you really help someone out, and when you really feel that, uh, it doesn't have to be something great. I mean, not huge, but it has to be something that, yeah, you do to somebody. That feeling you can't compare. So I like this, that you think about it as aligning. No, you're aligning the Christ consciousness, let's say, of this balance with heaven and earth and service to humanity. I like that.
Yeah. I like that you just brought up, this is found not just in Christianity and your ancient book readers. This idea of aligning with source is all
Yeah,
over the planet. And even with atheists, dare I say, that is their philosophy, and it's unique to them. And we don't know right now. We're on an experimental world with no physical representation. So whenever I hear, I keep going back to, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
yeah,
There's something good in that individual. We all have intrinsic value. And as we continue to live and lead life through curiosity, because no one knows all the answers. And that's where, as soon as I feel like a judgment piece within my mind, I release it and get curious. And I'm getting more quick to move directly to curiosity without going through the judgment
yeah.
zone. And I can feel, as I do this more often, the older I get, the more in alignment with acceptance and living in integrity with the values that I say I have. And the teams that start to magnetize around are more fully in alignment with those similar values through different talents, right? Because we are refining and we're learning from each other. And it's so wonderful when we meet people who hold this higher consciousness, that when we do meet a solution finding opportunity through a challenge, that we go through those conversations with more grace and ease and more quick to calm the intensity level of the emotional overreaction. And so oftentimes now I am with people that it doesn't even get to those boiling points, because we see right in that moment that we're both attempting that higher integrity, so that it's more quick to find those graceful solutions with
Yeah, you
patience
can.
and
Yeah,
love.
you can surf through that, and which is what I was going to ask you. What does it look like to carry the cross today? What is it about? And one of the things I think it's important is that it doesn't have to be, this tragic suffering that's the cross to bear. It doesn't have to be, a huge, a physical or sacrifice. So what are the subtle ways that we carry the cross?
Mm. Yeah, well, for one, what we're doing here is reframing that the burden to the celebration, right? What a transition from burden to celebration. And how to do that. Mentors work. I really think if we don't know how to transform our lives to the ideals that we say we want in that moment to expand meaning and elevate values, what you're doing, reading the books of people who you admire, or literally seeking out podcasts and absorbing content that will more infiltrate your being and your mind, so that more and more, when you hit these potential overreaction moments, you'll
Yeah.
be more quick to bring yourself back into remembering my purpose and my mission here. Uh, and to me, it's recognizing that we're all one family. Now, I would put the caveat that it's not a toxic family if you may have been raised with dysfunction. Let's think of the ideal family
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
that
that's the
our
point.
creator has.
Yes, yes, yes. It's
Because I
always the
wanted to really
ideal.
undo a lot. Yeah. Okay, well, what really is family? Well, my family, we all come
Yeah,
from interesting families, and now I really see that I love my biological family even more now, because I have this open understanding that they were just doing the best that they could. And I bring them down in my vision that we're both 5 years old sitting on a log by the river, learning how to be 5-year-olds in life,
definitely,
and it's
definitely,
very
definitely. And that's something, as a father, raising kids, that you realize that, you're never ready. I think nobody's ready to, it's like, okay, next year I'll become a father. No, it suddenly happens to you. So I think you're never ready. And that, going through that experience, number one, makes, you understand a lot about life, because now you're living what you lived through your kids, but also you're living what your father lived. You're living that, so now you have that perspective, and you understand a lot of the situations, a lot of the difficulties, a lot of the judgments, a lot of how it works. I think it's important to, number one, to be aware of those moments, and some of them that hurt you, some of them that you never didn't like, and that you consciously change. I think that's very important, and that's something that I've done. I think I've done good, but at the same time, you find that forgiveness, and I think it was, in my case, very important for through the situations that, especially my father and I did live through. It wasn't just to say, okay, sure, I'll forgive you for this, or we'll let bygones be bygones. No, it was a real transformation, a real understanding, to where now my relationship with my father is completely, 180 degrees, completely different, because we love each other beyond our mistakes and beyond our differences. I think that's the important thing, that you can go beyond that, not just say, okay, sure, I'll forgive you. No, I transcend that situation with you. I think that's very
Mm.
important.
I so love that you brought that in, and it reminds me of several stories that there has been this massive forgiveness. That I think I caught one on Oprah a while ago about these two dads. One of the sons killed the other son's son, and then the
Okay.
dad came into the relationship of love and forgiveness, and are spreading that story. I just got goosebumps. I
Really,
that
that's interesting.
so it is loving beyond that. And again, it doesn't downplay what happened, yet using what happened as fodder
Uh-huh, uh-huh,
to
exactly.
propel into this literal transformation of a being. And it does not excuse anything that happened, yet using it as the catalyst to love. And this actually goes into something else about, how we're always thinking about even the human form as we think of practical skills. It's the idea that people use the language around diseases that are genetic. Well,
Mhm.
now the science is coming out, and I have worked through my own body with changing my paradigm around it's just like sin. Nobody can give you anything, and you have full access to taking responsibility. If you live in that victim state of saying, well, for one, shift your language around even owning the disease. It's not yours. You may have symptoms, yet it's not my cancer. It's not mine. You don't own anything. And the more you can release yourself
Mhm.
that language, and tell yourself that you're healing and you're healed and every single cell in your
Yeah.
body is healing and you have the access to all of the full potential of the universes to be healed. There are stories out there where this has happened for many years. And so that shift from releasing that victim mentality really of owning your generational past and calling it yours, just like sin, none of that is yours and your reality. So you have
Exactly.
full
I like
forward.
that you brought that and into this, how victimhood makes you, that original sin, which is not even yours, but that you're buying it, and that's really pitiful. I think that the worst that you can do is really buy into victimhood, and it's just, you're just getting crutches, and yeah, you're limiting yourself to a lot of potential, and that really is really, I mean, the worst that you can do, probably.
We're not judging you out there if you're doing this. We
No,
are
no, no, exactly.
enlightening
We're
you
not.
with this information.
Exactly. Exactly. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry if that comes up, but yeah, it's really important to catch yourself in those situations and understand that and go beyond that because as we've seen in any feeling, good or bad, is a feeling and it stimulates you. Even bad feelings. Some feeling pity stimulates you. So do not stimulate yourself with negative feelings, negative thoughts, emotions, like we were saying is get yourself in a positive loop. And I mean, just to kind of summarize everything before we close, it's using those symbols of the cross to put that message that really Jesus brought. It wasn't an atonement to rid the sins of the world, but it was really a message, an example of a message that Jesus brought, so that we can now, and that's the key, it's us not just to have the theory here and say, okay, how beautiful of what Jesus did, but no, how can we get inspired from that action, from that situation, and do our part and go through our cross and carry our cross ourselves in through the vicissitudes of life and in helping and doing what's good out there, right? So, what can you tell us about before we go on this, for Helen, and how we can live this cross?
Well, so I feel like I want to just read a little bit of
Go ahead.
this favorite papers in Paper 100, Section 7, The Acme of Religious Living. I mentioned it before earlier, and let's just go with the Son of Man was always a well poised personality. Even his enemies maintained a wholesome respect for him. They even feared his presence. Jesus was unafraid. He was surcharged with divine enthusiasm, yet never became fanatical. He was emotionally active, but never flighty. He was imaginative, but always practical. He frankly faced the realities of life, but he was never dull or prosaic. He was courageous, but never reckless. Prudent, never cowardly. He was sympathetic, not sentimental. Unique, not eccentric. He was pious, not sanctimonious. And he was so well poised because he was so perfectly unified. So I think that's a good place to wrap that up.
Yes,
And
a
of
good,
course,
very good
as you
place.
and I, yeah, we're always encouraging you out there to do something, be more in alignment with your values. Uh, Research them, see what naturally comes to you, and look at those who you admire in others. Get yourself involved with receiving information, seeking out content to pervade your reality to help you shift your habits and shift your daily life into this more. I don't even like going into the positive and negative anymore. Like, I'm shifting away from that into more of a Taoist concept of finding the middle way,
Yeah,
right? He was
balance.
never
That's it.
this, yet and nothing is good or bad. And when we bring ourselves away from the good and the bad and move into the middle and acceptance of all the things that people, the leadership in power, the politicians, the corporate greed, when we look at that with disgust and disdain, that is one of the issues. Come into it with acceptance. Okay, we're on an experimental world. I'm not going to be here much longer.
Yeah,
How can I contribute?
yeah,
Instead of
yeah,
complaining, you're only bringing it down, right?
yeah.
What can I do? How can I contribute? And even if you don't need to start a nonprofit, or you don't even really need to do anything beyond shifting your
Your
mind
attitude, yeah, your
into
attitude, yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's
It's
so
it's a very
powerful.
simple change. It's a very simple change that you wouldn't even imagine. Yeah, definitely, definitely. Well, that's a great place to end in using this symbol of the cross as a change and it's an inspiration for your life. So thanks a lot, April Helen, for this lovely conversation, and thank all of you for joining us. Remember to subscribe and to tell people if you liked our show to come and visit us. Maybe they'll find something that really hits them or is meaningful. So until next time, I'm Santiago Nieland. This is the Divine Within. Take care and carpe diem.
On the Divine Within podcast, we'll share real conversations to help you find a personal connection with God. My goal is to support your faith, growth, and journey toward discovering the divine within yourself. Join us to deepen your faith and spiritual journey.